What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. RSL CG3M bookshelf speaker, $210 a pair. Let's go. So you guys all know I reviewed the Speedwoofer 10S Mark II and the original Speedwoofer, and those were tremendous value. If you're looking for the best subwoofer under $500, RSL Speedwoofer 10S Mark II is the one. It was just the definition of value. And that got me wondering, are there speakers going to perform on that same level? Do they bring that same level of high value and performance to the table at a low price? So we got a pair in here and we're going to talk about today. So we'll throw the main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about some standout features, what the speakers sound like. We'll do some comparisons. Then we will wrap up the video. So standout features are going to be the size. These things are tiny, guys. We got a 4-inch driver. I mean, this is going to be similar in size to like the Monocoustic Supermon Mini, the PSB P3, you know, speakers like the, not even the Silverline Minuet Supreme Plus. That's quite a bit deeper. Think like Arundel 1961 bookshelf. These are small speakers, guys. And we'll do some comparisons in a little bit to some of those speakers. Don't you worry. $210 a pair, super affordable for most people. You know what I mean? As Thomas in Stereo says, you know, he talks about you got to save some money, eat some ramen. You will not have to eat too much ramen to be able to afford these speakers, guys. They can be wall mounted. They're not too deep at all. They have options on the back for wall mounting. They're front slot ported, so you don't have to worry about any, you know, blocking the port off if you mount them and things like that. I use them down here in my listening room as part of a 2-channel stereo, and upstairs in my TV rig where I watch Netflix, Hulu, anime, I play video games, all kinds of stuff. And I don't have a center channel up there. So again, it was like 2.1 stereo for TV use. I found these performed very well. They had a great phantom center effect. Dialogue was very clear, very intelligible. Let's talk about what they sound like. Let's jump into it, guys. Look, these speakers are all about neutrality, so there's not a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of descriptors I'm going to be able to use to describe the sound, but I'm going to do my best. These are all about effortlessness in their top-end presentation. It's super neutral, so it's non-fatiguing. It's very easy to listen to, but there's still a great amount of sparkle there. There's a great amount of air and separation that kind of surprised me for this price category. I loved the top end of this speaker. Moving down to the mid-range, again, neutral. When a mid-range is neutral, there's just not a lot to talk about. I will tell you, human voices did have a sense of realism to them that I was not expecting at this price point. Moving down to the bass, it's not a bass-boosted speaker in any way, and it is a small speaker. It's going to roll off around 90 hertz, so a subwoofer is mandatory. That's no surprise. Any speaker this size, subwoofer is mandatory, guys. So look, I've done my best to just tell you what it sounds like, but when the name of the game is neutrality from top to bottom, it's kind of hard to give more descriptors. So we're going to jump into some comparisons, and hopefully that'll help give you some context. But before we do that, let's talk about imaging and sound staging real quick. So look, these are going to image fantastic. I had no complaints about the imaging. Soundstage width, height, and depth were both very good. Depth was notably impressive, especially at this price category. Usually, affordable speakers, a lot of them can stage like fairly wide. A lot of them can have good imaging. Most speakers have good imaging these days, guys, to be totally honest, right? Soundstage depth generally, however, is not something you usually find a lot of in the low budget category. These speakers had a good amount of depth to them. In fact, what the speakers these reminded me of the most were the Arundel 1961 bookshelf, and those are $900 a pair. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying these perform on that same level. Those are 4 times the price. But if you saw my review of those Arundel 1961 bookshelves and you thought, man, that sounds amazing, I want that experience, but I am not trying to spend $900 on a pair of speakers, the RSL CG3M is a great alternative. Again, just to be clear, I'm not saying it performs on that same level as that $900 Arundel, but the voicing is similar, what they do is similar, and they're a similar size. Anyhow, comparisons. Let's talk about this versus the Sony SSCS5. That's another really good affordable speaker. It sells, you know, at varying prices. Let's call it $150 for the pair is the average those Sony sell for. These are $210, so they're priced fairly similarly. The two speakers both have a really good top end. The main difference is going to be the Sony is going to be on the forward side of neutral, where the RSL is going to be just more dead neutral. Moving down to the mid-range, both speakers are fairly neutral in the mid-range, not a lot going on there. Moving down to the bass, I found the Sony being much larger to have a fuller sound and more bass, where the RSL being much smaller. Subwoofer just absolutely mandatory, didn't have much bass at all. What the biggest difference was, in my opinion, is this. The Sony SSCS5 is kind of considered the king of the cheap category, and it is for a lot of reasons. It's a fantastic speaker, and I like it a lot. However, two things to keep in mind if you're comparing it to this RSL. One, every amazing thing anyone ever says about the Sony SSCS5 is at low volumes. It is not a speaker that likes to play loud. You start cranking that volume, it starts to fall apart very, very quickly. The RSL CG3M can play much louder and take much more of a beating and hold its composure. Second thing, I would not want to wall mount the Sonys. They've got a rear firing port and they would look hideous on a wall. The RSL CG3M are designed to be wall mounted, so if that is a factor for you, make sure to keep that in mind. And that wraps up that comparison. Let's talk about these versus another affordable speaker that I haven't reviewed yet, the ELAC BS41. That's $160 for the pair. The two speakers are very different. They're similar in size, but again, the ELAC has that rear firing port, so you wouldn't want to wall mount that. The ELAC is actually a bass boosted speaker, so despite being similar in size, it's got substantially more bass and a much fuller sound, but generally speaking, affordable speakers that are bass boosted are going to be a little bit sloppy with their bass. It's not going to be the most accurate, and it certainly will blend up into the mid-range at times. Speaking of the mid-range, this is where the two speakers are very different. The ELAC BS41, you might describe the mid-range as warm, and it's not a bad mid-range in any way, but the mid-range of the RSL CG3M was a lot more open and expansive sounding. I preferred it a lot. Moving up to the treble, I found the ELAC to be just a little bit dull sounding in the treble region. It was just on the dark side of neutral a little bit. It did not have much air, clarity, or sparkle. The RSL CG3M took the easy win in the treble category. Overall, I would strongly take the RSL CG3M over the ELAC BS41 without a doubt, unless this is the only scenario where I'd pick the ELAC is like, let's say I was throwing together like a garage system and I just wanted to like shove two speakers somewhere that I didn't care about. I'd probably use the bass boosted ELACs for that. Because it's like, who cares about accuracy at that point? You're talking about shoving them in a garage somewhere. But anywhere inside the home, I would easily take the RSL CG3M over the ELAC BS41. Let's see if there's any other comparisons we want to do here. Let's talk about the PSB P3 that's a similar size. Oh, another thing, real quick, ELAC BS41, very, very hard to drive compared to the RSL. The RSL was much easier to drive. I had to set my amplifier to about twice the volume to get the same amount of output with the ELACs. Didn't like that at all. Let's talk about these versus the PSB P3s. That's a little bit of an older speaker, but the PSB still makes it. I think it's like $220 for the pair. I'm just going to keep it simple, guys. I like the RSLs a lot more over the PSB P3. The PSB P3 is a frustrating speaker. It absolutely lacks dynamics and is very hard to drive. It got raving reviews for some reason, which I just like. That was one of those scenarios like, I'm going to keep it 100 with you guys. When I saw like all those written reviews for the PSB P3 come in as just raves from like the traditional magazines, I was just like, you guys are full of shit. I don't trust it. It is what it is, though. That's the magazine game. You know what I mean? Some of these speaker companies, they're big dollar advertisers, and they're going to get better reviews. It just like it is what it is. It's part of the game. Anyhow, who cares about PSB? We're talking about RSL. Look, the PSB P3, it's not a terrible speaker, but the RSL CG3M is just better in every way from top to bottom. The only area where the PSB P3 is going to be a little bit better is, despite being quite tiny, again, it's a bass boosted speaker like the ELAC. It's going to have a fuller sound. But again, it's going to be sloppy. It's going to be a little bit slow. It's not going to be the quickest bass. It is going to blend up into the mid-range from time to time. The mid-range of the PSB P3 is going to be much more closed off compared to the RSL. Same with the top end. It's going to sound a lot more congested compared to the RSL. Again, I would easily take the RSL CG3M over the PSB P3. Now, some of you might be wondering, how does it compare to stuff that's a lot more expensive? Well, usually expensive stuff is expensive because it's better. So let's do it real quick though. Arendelle 1961 1S is 4 times the price. It's $800 or $900 for the pair. Similar in size, similar voicing tonally from top to bottom. They both have a top end that's neutral but easy to listen to with tons of detail, air, and sparkle. They both have a neutral mid-range that has great dialogue clarity, voice intelligibility, and vocal performance. They both have very low quantities of bass, but bass that is still very like clean, clear, and best way I could say it, it's set up to be perfectly blended with a subwoofer. What do you get more from the Arendelle being 4 times the price? Well, you get a speaker that can play a lot louder. despite being the same size. You get a speaker that is built with much nicer components, nice painted finish, higher quality crossover components, HDF cabinet, things like that. Better sense of refinement in the higher frequencies, and it can be, again, pushed to much louder volumes. So that's what you get for 4 times the price. I wouldn't compare this to anything more expensive. It just stops making sense. You know, there's like the Mon Acoustic Supermon Mini that's $2,000 a pair. You get billet aluminum cabinets on that bad boy. That's just a whole nother league. That's 10 times the price, right? So look, I'll keep it simple. The RSL CG3M at $210 a pair. Do I like them? No, I fucking love them, guys. It's just that simple. It was the same experience I had with the subwoofer. When I heard the Speedwoofer 10S Mark II, I was like, damn, this is literally the best you could do in a subwoofer at this price category. That's just how I felt. It's still how I feel. I tell people all the time, if your max budget on a subwoofer is $500, you just go buy a Speedwoofer. It's that simple. You don't need to watch any other reviews. And I'm going to go ahead and say the same thing here. If $200 is your budget for a speaker, I don't think you can do better than the RSL CG3M. I think there's a few that might be worth your consideration. You know, especially like if you don't need to wall mount them, you don't need the small size, you don't listen all that loud, you might want to check out the Sonys for an AB. But like the other ones, like the ELAX, no contest. PSB P3, no contest. Even cheaper stuff like the Mica MB42X or Dayton B652R, get the fuck out of here. Those aren't even close. Look, with that said, that brings this video to a close. So far, RSL has been consistent. What they've brought to the table on any product I've checked out of theirs was a product that I felt was priced incredibly fair. A product that made me feel like, man, you are getting maximum product for your money. So hats off, RSL. Fantastic job. I highly recommend these if these are in your price category. And just to be clear, look, if you've got more, don't be cheap, guys. Spend more if you have it. You know what I mean? You know, I already know someone in the comments is going to ask me a crazy question like how they compare to the KEF LS50 Meta. Come on, those are like $1,500-$1,600. Let's not be crazy. If you want any more comparisons, this channel does have a free Discord. I'll do my best to answer your questions in the comments. YouTube comments aren't the easiest place to converse though. So look, hop in the free Discord. Links in the description. If you've got any questions, ask there or in the Discord. Until next time, later.